And actually, I was double checking. Palm Sunday is next Sunday. And Marissa made some more handouts for the spiritual gifts. I know Tammy was wanting one of those and didn't get one. And Brooke, if you wouldn't mind, I've got those in that manila folder there next to my Bible bag. Those are the spiritual gifts questionnaire. If anybody wants one of those, if you'll raise your hand and she'll give it to you. And there's another stack of papers there, Brooke. I'm sorry, my girls are homesick and I lost my helpers this morning. But the other handout is one that I made for Passion Week. And it is it's a timeline of everything that happened in the week before Jesus' crucifixion. And this starts next Sunday, which is going to be Palm Sunday, when he entered back into Jerusalem. So this is a timeline of what happened each day of the week of Passion Week. And I appreciate you doing that for me, Brooke. So what we're going to continue on today is what Daryl was laughing at my title here, Unusual Behaviors of Jesus. And we talked last week about him cursing the fig tree and how that was unusual because, Jesus is seen to heal, he is seen to bless, he is seen to restore. So, why did he curse a fig tree so that it wouldn't put out fruit? And we went through that, discussed the symbolism of the fig tree, what it meant as a sign of Israel, and a transition from the old covenant into the new covenant because of Israel's disobedience. And so today, what I want to talk about is the overturning of the money-changing tables. And I think when we hear about the overturning of the money-changing tables, we think about Jesus' righteous zeal, that he has a desire for things to be honored and for things to be recognized as righteous in the house of God. And so it was his righteous anger for why he turned over the money-changing tables. And that's true, and that is part of it, but it's actually much deeper and more complicated than that. And I actually don't know that I'm going to be able to get through all of this today, but we're certainly going to get into a large chunk and talk about where the money-changing tables were in the temple, why the location was even important, and what this meant when he did this. So we have two different passages that we're going to read an excerpt from to describe this event. The first one is going to be in John chapter 2, and I've got this side by side here with Mark chapter 11. In John, this places this event at the beginning of Jesus' ministry, and then in the Synoptic Gospels, it's described as happening in Passion Week on Tuesday. So this is kind of like it's a theological question. Did this happen at the beginning of Jesus' ministry or at the end? In my opinion, and from what modern scholars are thinking today, is that this was a single event that likely happened during Passion Week, and John is including it at the beginning of his ministry as a symbolic illustration, to not illustrate a specific time, but to illustrate, again, the changing from the old covenant to the new covenant. And we'll get into that, and I think you'll all understand that a little bit later after we get into this a little bit deeper. So I'm going to read the account in John chapter 2. The Passover of the Jews was at hand, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. In the temple, he found those who were selling oxen and sheep and pigeons, and the money changers sitting there. And making a whip of cords, he drove them all out of the temple with the sheep and oxen. And he poured out the coins of the money changers and overturned their tables. And he told those who sold the pigeons, "Take these things away. Do not make my Father's house a house of trade." His disciples remembered that it was written, "Zeal for your house will consume me." And we're going to read this similar account in Mark chapter 11. On reaching Jerusalem, Jesus entered the temple courts and began driving out those who were buying and selling there. He overturned the tables of the money changers and the benches of those selling doves, and would not allow anyone to carry merchandise through the temple courts. And as he taught them, he said, "Is it not written, 'My house will be called a house of prayer for all nations,' but you have made it a den of robbers." So we have questions that's brought up from this account. What was the purpose of the money-changing tables in the temple in the first place? Why did Jesus have to then cleanse the temple? What did this symbolize? So these are the things that we're going to get into. And in order to do this, I kind of want to take a step kind of back and a broader look at what was happening in the temple. And to do that, I want to talk a little bit about the structure of the temple at that time, so you all can get an idea of the place in which this occurred. And the temple itself, this is the second temple. Solomon's temple, when he had initially built it in grandeur and splendor, this was destroyed. So the temple was then rebuilt in more humble means afterwards. And then it was King Herod who expanded the temple size. King Herod was not actually a king, but he was named King of the Jews. He was recognized as this by the Roman government after being granted sovereignty to rule over the conquered areas of Rome that included Jerusalem. So we have this area of Jerusalem, and Herod is appointed as king over this. And king is more of a, I would say, like a nickname. He wasn't actually a king. The Roman government wasn't set up that they had kings. The emperors were at the top, and below this were military officials and things that ruled over certain kingdoms. So he is not actually a king. He is still dependent on the Roman government for their protection and has to do according to them, has to collect taxes for them. He was considered a half-Jew, and I don't know that most people kind of realize this, in that he did have Jewish ties, but he was negatively referred to as a half-Jew because his lineage was of the Edomites. These were enemies of Israel, and it goes back to Esau. And we have Jacob and Esau separated, and Jacob was the chosen one. And it was from this lineage that Herod was born into. And his people, even though they go back to a Jewish lineage, they did not adhere to Jewish customs, but they were a part of a nation that was later conquered by the Jews, and they were forced into this religion. It was like they were forced converts. So they behaved as Jews, but the Jews themselves did not look to them as true, authentic Jews, and always questioned their motives and would negatively refer to them as half-Jews. So he also had ties to the emperor and set to establish himself in both worlds through extensive architectural feats by building both pagan temples and expanding the Jewish temple. So to have ties to the emperor was, that is the major contact. The emperor is seen as, kind of chosen from God, and not God in the sense that we think about, but divinely appointed. And so he is at the top of the entire Roman Empire. And for Herod to have ties to the emperor gave him great power. And with this great power, he became hungry for it. And an overturning of the emperors, he lived through, and I can't remember the exact names, but it was from one, I think, to Augustus. So there was a change of power during this time. So he was seen as being allegiant to one, and then another one rose up. So he was in a really precarious time where, if he had proven his allegiance to the first emperor, and now there's a second one in power, then he is at risk. But he was able to kind of manipulate and to prove his allegiance to the new emperor and help to solidify his power. So he is a real cunning individual who is able to schmooze who he needs to in order to elevate the people that are of power in order for him to maintain his own power. So he has ties in all of these different realms. He has ties to the emperor. He has ties to the Jewish people. But in nowhere does he have complete ties. His allegiance is mainly to himself and to maintaining his power. And he does so in a way where he kills one of his wives. In fact, his most beloved wife. He kills her sons because she is Jewish herself, and he believes that they have more of a rightful lineage and more power than him. So he has his family murdered for treason. So he is building temples. He simultaneously builds temples to worship the emperor while also doubling the size of the temple in Jerusalem. So during this time, there is a Roman religion called the imperial cult. And if you believe that the emperor is divinely appointed, carries the divine ability to rule over Rome, then you elevate them to a god status. And there is worship of the emperor. This is the imperial cult. And this is one of the ways in which Herod is able to maintain his power, in that he erects these huge statues of the emperor and builds these great architectural, great buildings and great cities in honor of their name. And so they are, and this is all in the name of Rome, all in the name of the emperor. So they are very impressed with Herod's feats. And while we think of Herod in expanding this second temple area and making it larger, there's actually even bigger feats that he takes on that still stand today. And this is these are artistic renderings of cities and of other temples that Herod built. Caesarea Maritima, Samaria Sebasti, and the sanctuary of Pan down here. And in Caesarea Maritima, this whole area, this whole city, Herod was responsible for building. You know, not just an expansion of an already established area, but this whole city. And there are documentaries about the underwater cement that they were able to build in order to extend out these big structures that jutted out into the sea, and just how spectacular these places were. So Herod is responsible for all of these, but all in the name of power, all in the name to elevate himself and to establish himself. So he has his feet and his hands in all these different areas of life. So we see here the temple. The original outline, this is Solomon's original platform wall, and that is outlined in red. So that was the original outline and structure of where the temple sat. And I don't know if you can see it, but it says the top of the mount of the ark sat here on bedrock. And this is also thought to be the place where Jacob laid his head down, and where he saw the ladder and angels ascending and descending. It's the connection place between the physical world and the spiritual world. So here we have, and this is where the holiest of holies, the innermost, was. And so this surrounding red area is the platform in which the first temple stood. So expanding out from that, you can see how far Herod extended the area surrounding the temple. And this was done in a way that sacrifices and worship were not disrupted. Those continued throughout this whole construction process. And what we have today, we know about the Western Wall and the Wailing Wall, where devout Jews will go and pray and have their petitions before God, and also praying for the Messiah to come. And this is in the picture here to the right. And you have, I don't know if you all can see, but it's the outline of this black area. And this is the Western Wall. And if you look to the picture to the left, where the red star is, this is the location of where the Western Wall would have been in Herod's expanded temple. So it is a retaining wall on the western part of the expanded temple area. And this is, some people think like it's part of the original temple. The original temple, Jesus made the prophecy that no stone is going to be unturned. So the original temple was completely annihilated. The only thing that remains is this western retaining wall. And this is the location of it. So this picture, I think, better illustrates the size of the expansion that Herod constructed versus the original temple, which is seen here pictured in the middle. So you really have a very small area on the inside of where the temple actually is, but expanded out are these porticos and these porch areas, and all of this area was called the Gentiles' courtyard. This is where, if you weren't a Jew, you could go, you could worship, you could bring your sacrifices, and you could bring your offerings. This is the area in which you would be permitted. It's a 32-acre surrounding of the temple. It was surrounded, the temple was still protected. So you could not, if you were a Gentile, you still could not go in anywhere near the temple area. It was surrounded by a wall called a soreg. And this wall, you can see the picture here, you would be able to see over it. It's not like a completely solid wall that would block view. In fact, it was made with lattice work and was of the such that you could see over it. But it was a dividing wall. And throughout the wall were notices and signs that says, and it's listed here, these are written in Greek and Latin, all surrounding the temple. No foreigner is to enter within the balustrade and embankment around the sanctuary. Whoever is caught will be responsible for his own death, which will ensue. So it's pretty clear. It's not just no trespassing. It's who can't come in here and what's going to happen to you if you do. And so these are signs that surround the entire temple, and it separates this outer Gentile court from the inner temple area. And this is a sign, it's pictured here. There are several surviving signs that say this today, that are kind of emblems and relics of what was. So you have this area that Herod has constructed surrounding the temple, and you have this wall of separation where the Gentiles can't pass into it. And it's actually in this Gentile courtyard, this is where the money changing tables were. This is where they were selling the oxen, the sheep, the pigeons, all of these things in order for Gentiles to be able to have and offer a sacrifice. And it was done in such a way that it was overcrowding this area that the Gentiles were even able to come and worship and participate in. It was made into a place of commerce more than a place of worship. And this wall that surrounded it and separated it out, this is what is thought to be mentioned here in Ephesians, speaking of Jesus. For he himself is our peace, who has made us both one, and has broken down in his flesh the dividing wall of hostility. this dividing wall of hostility is this Soreg wall that separated the Gentile area from the Jewish area. They were not able to pass beyond that, or they were going to die. They were going to be killed because it was seen as a holy area where you had to be clean. There were certain, laws, old laws that were passed to Moses about ways in order that you are able to even go to the temple. So Gentiles were absolutely not allowed. But this expansion that Herod had created into the court of the Gentiles was done under the premise of Isaiah 56 and 7, where Isaiah says, "I will bring them to my holy mountain and make them joyful in my house of prayer. Their burnt offerings and sacrifices will be accepted on my altar, for my house will be called a house of prayer for all the nations." So this was the intention that Herod was expanding this out. We want this to be a house of prayer for all nations, for Jew and Gentile alike. But in creating this, they weren't allowed to pass beyond this wall. There were still limitations. They were creating this in a way that they felt like was appropriate and in line with Scripture from what they knew. They wanted it to be a house of prayer for all the nations, while at the same time having death threats surrounding the temple for anybody that would enter in. So the overturning of the money tables, it occurred in the court of the Gentiles, the 32 acres surrounding the temple that allowed all people to come and worship. So we have an idea of now the location in which Jesus came to overturn the money tables. It was in the court of Gentiles. It was a place for everybody who could come and worship. And so why were there money changing tables? Why was there places of currency being exchanged? So this gets into the temple tax. This is an obligatory tax that all male Jews over the age of 20 are expected to pay for the upkeep of the temple. It's an annual tax, and they bring it during around the time of Passover. It was established in the Old Testament to fund the maintenance and services of the temple, and it's set at an annual cost of half a shekel, which is about 2 days of work that they were expected to pay once a year for the upkeep of the temple. But it had to be paid in proper accepted currency. It couldn't be paid in, pagan money. You couldn't just give the equal worth in some other type of form. It had to be in the accepted currency of the temple. So the money changers here were distributing out the accepted currency. But I want to look at this temple tax a little bit more. We're going to read about this in Exodus chapter 30. "When you take a census of the Israelites to register them, each of the men must pay a ransom for his life to the Lord as they are registered. Then no plague will come on them as they are registered. Everyone who is registered must pay half a shekel according to the sanctuary shekel, 20 gerahs to the shekel. This half shekel is a contribution to the Lord. Each man who is registered 20 years old or more must give this contribution to the Lord. The wealthy may not give more, and the poor may not give less than half a shekel when giving the contribution to the Lord to atone for your lives. Take the atonement price from the Israelites and use it for the service of the tent of meeting. It will serve as a reminder for the Israelites before the Lord to atone for your lives." So this is a census of the Israelites, to count them. When God is counting them, then it is it's a sign of ownership, but also of obligation that they have. So they are having to pay, and each person, it doesn't matter if you're rich and can give more, it doesn't matter if you're poor and you struggle to give what you have, every man's life costs the same. And And to account for this, and to account for the rescue that the Lord had delivered them out of Egypt, each one of them are responsible for the same price to pay into this temple tax. So this is a particular type of currency in the time of Jesus that's being accepted. And this is the Tyrian shekel. It's an ancient silver coin minted in, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing if it's Tyre, from roughly 126 or 25 BC to AD 65 or 66. It's renowned for its high silver purity. It's a 94 to 97% pure silver coin. And this is what the money changers are distributing out to the people that come to pay their temple tax. Due to this consistency, it was the required currency for paying the annual temple tax in Jerusalem. And also, these coins are widely believed to be the 30 pieces of silver from the biblical narrative of Judas Iscariot. What he betrayed Jesus with, he was paid in this silver currency here. So the temple tax, the money changers took the people's money beyond equal and kept the profit. This is the problem, that not only are they set up obstructing the ability of worship of the Gentiles to come to a house of prayer for all nations, but they are cheating them out of money. So they are not exchanging them equal for equal. In fact, when people come and they give their money, they are keeping the profit that they would get and exchanging out this money, and this is being accepted by the priests that are there. And they're saying, this is just more money for us. We get even more money than the temple tax that they're paying. We're taking a cut here of the profit. Something else too, Jesus paid this tax. Jesus paid the temple tax, and he did it in a miraculous way. He didn't reach into his pocket and hand them the temple tax, but he said that he didn't need to pay the temple tax. This was a declaration of his divinity, in him saying that he's the Son of God without coming out and saying this. And we read about this in Matthew chapter 17. After Jesus and his disciples arrived in Capernaum, the collectors of the temple tax came to Peter and asked, "Doesn't your teacher pay the temple tax?" "Yes, he does," he replied. When Peter came into the house, Jesus was the first to speak. "What do you think, Simon?" he asked. "From whom do the kings of the earth collect duty and taxes? From their own children or from others?" "From others," Peter answered. "Then the children are exempt," Jesus said to him. So he's saying that he doesn't have to pay this temple tax because he is God's son. He's not expected to pay this temple tax of rescue because he is God's son. He is God himself, and he is exempt from doing this. But then Jesus said, "But so that we may not cause offense, go to the lake and throw out your line. Take the first fish you catch, open its mouth, and you will find a 4 drachma coin. Take it and give it to them for my tax and yours." Because one coin is the 2 shekels. One coin would pay for 2 people's lives. So Jesus is saying, I don't have to pay this. I'm the Son of God, but so as to not cause offense, throw your line here, catch this fish that has the coin in its mouth, and it pays for him and Simon's both. So this is the temple tax that is paid. So I think that's really amazing and deep. When we think of money changing tables and we think of, them stealing, I didn't really have a concept of, why are they having to exchange money there? Why are these things set up? And this is all done, and it is all, I guess it's all laid out and appropriate in the Old Testament, but the way in which they were doing it was thievery. And this is what Jesus said. He said that you say that this is a house of prayer for all nations. And we see where it was set up. We see that it was in the Gentile court. And we see that the Gentile court was created to be a house of prayer for all nations. But he says, you've made it into a den of robbers. A den of robbers. So this is actually where it gets even deeper. The question is, what is the den of robbers? When we think of that, we just think they're just being, disingenuous, they're being thieves, they're stealing people's money, so this is the den of robbers. But the den of robbers is actually a reference to a reference. So there is another time in the Bible where a den of robbers is discussed, and when it's discussed in this Old Testament reference, it's referencing back to something else. So there's several layers here, but this is the part that I find most amazing. Not only that, Jesus is breaking down this dividing wall of hostility, that he is allowing now Gentiles to have access to the temple, access to genuine worship. But what he is also saying about the people that God has entrusted to be the children of God, and calling what they have created their house to be, what the temple to be, is this den of robbers. So let's go into this a little bit more. So when Jesus says, you've wanted this place to be a house of prayer for all nations, or this is to be a house of prayer for all nations, but you have turned it into a den of robbers. When we look back at this Old Testament reference to where this is mentioned, it is mentioned by Jeremiah. So we're going to go back and read this section in Jeremiah and what he's talking about. And we know that Jeremiah, when we think of Jeremiah, we think about him as the weeping prophet. But the reason that he is weeping is because Jerusalem is still, it's still Jerusalem. There's still the first temple there. And he is seeing the end of Jerusalem. Prophetically, the Lord is telling him that the people are going to be taken captive into Babylon, and they're going to have to go because of their sins that they've committed. And so Jeremiah is trying to tell the people of their impending doom. He's trying to warn the people that they have become so evil that God is going to have a righteous judgment on them. And so he's trying to impress upon them, now is the time. You can still turn away. If you correct yourself now, look at the path that you're on. If you can steer this away, then you can avoid all this. So he is impassioned and prophetically seeing what's on down the line for them. So this is what Jeremiah is saying to the people. This is the word that came to Jeremiah from the Lord. Stand at the gate of the Lord's house and there proclaim this message. So just think about that. You pulled into church this morning, there's somebody standing out there, and this is the message that they're saying. Hear the word of the Lord, all you people of Judah who come through these gates to worship the Lord. This is what the Lord Almighty, the God of Israel, says. Reform your ways and your actions, and I will let you live in this place. And this is the message to the Jews about Jerusalem. Do not trust in deceptive words and say, this is the temple of the Lord, the temple of the Lord, the temple of the Lord. If you really change your ways and your actions and deal with each other justly, if you do not oppress the foreigner, the fatherless, or the widow, and do not shed innocent blood in this place, and if you do not follow other gods to your own harm, then I will let you live in this place, in the land I gave your ancestors forever and ever. But look, you are trusting in deceptive words that are worthless. Will you steal and murder, commit adultery and perjury, burn incense to Baal, and follow other gods you have not known, and then come and stand before me in this house, which bears my name, and say, we are safe to do all these detestable things? Has this house, which bears my name, become a den of robbers to you? But I have been watching, declares the Lord. Go now to the place in Shiloh where I first made a dwelling for my name, and see what I did to it because of the wickedness of my people Israel. While you were doing all these things, declares the Lord, I spoke to you again and again, but you did not listen. I called you, but you did not answer. Therefore, what I did to Shiloh, I will now do to the house that bears my name, the temple you trust in, the place I gave to you and your ancestors. I will thrust you from my presence, just as I did all your fellow Israelites, the people of Ephraim. So you can see while these Old Testament prophets, many of them were murdered, and in fact, Jeremiah had to stand on trial for what he is saying, because he is saying your people are going to end up like Shiloh. And so this brings the reference to the reference. The reference to the den of robbers is here what Jeremiah is saying. It's at a time when people are saying, this is the temple of the Lord. We are safe here. We can do whatever we want to do. And because we can come back to the temple, which bears, the Lord's name, that there is going to be protection no matter what they do or what they follow. And Jeremiah is saying to them, no, that's not true. That's not what you can do. The Lord is not going to stand for this, because he destroyed a similar temple, a similar tabernacle in a place called Shiloh. So I know this is getting intertwined, but I want to go through this kind of quickly, and then we will touch through it again next week, just so we can have it in our minds. So what's happened so far is that Jesus has overturned these money-changing tables, and he has accused them of turning it into a den of robbers. And this is a reference back to Jeremiah saying that the temple has been turned into a den of robbers because they are doing whatever they want to do, basically desecrating the temple, saying one thing, worshiping Baal, and then coming in and decrying protection from God. And God is not honoring this. And in Jeremiah's message, he's saying that this has happened before, and God has destroyed this place. And what the message is here is that God's favor is not tied to location. It's not the where. It's not the temple. It's not that it is this sacred space that is exempt from anybody's purpose in going there. And so what it's referencing is a place called Shiloh. Shiloh is a place when Joshua overtook Canaan, when they had the Ark of the Covenant at this time. And when Joshua overtook Canaan, when they came into the Promised Land, there was no Temple Mount. That hadn't been determined yet. There was no temple that was built. So where they rested the ark when they came into the Promised Land was a place called Shiloh. A place called Shiloh. And this is actually where the ark stayed for 300 years. When they first came into the Promised Land, this is where the ark stayed. But what happened was that the people were fighting the Philistines. And they thought, we're losing this battle. We need the ark here in battle with us. So they go and they remove the ark from where it is supposed to be, from its resting place in Shiloh, and they bring it into battle at the Battle of Aphek against the Philistines. And they do it as like a symbol, as a sign. God didn't tell them to do this. They're saying, I'm bringing this like as a good luck charm, as a talisman, as something that is going to help us in battle. And God did not look on this favorably. So Jeremiah is using this reference as a warning to the people. If God was willing to abandon and allow the destruction of his first dwelling place, which he does, he destroys it completely. Not the ark, but the place and where it was located in Shiloh here. If God is willing to completely destroy this place, the tabernacle at Shiloh, because of wickedness, then he would certainly do the same to Jerusalem's temple. That it is not the place of worship, but it is the intention of worship and the righteousness and the commands of God in which and where you can worship. He's saying that locale alone does not offer protection, and Jews cannot decry protection in the temple while actively sinning and defiling God's name. So we have Jerusalem's false belief here. The temple building and the ark is a talisman that prevents disaster. God would never leave his name's dwelling. He is tied to this place. He would never forsake this place. And that the rituals and the sacrifices are enough to please God. But Jeremiah is speaking against all this. He's saying that the tabernacle did not save Shiloh from the Philistines. So the temple here, even though we have the temple, the dwelling place of God, that's not enough to save you from Babylon captivity. Because the tabernacle and the place where the tabernacle itself was destroyed in Shiloh, therefore God can destroy this too if he wills. And this false belief that God will never leave his name's dwelling, well, God in Psalm 78:60, it says God forsook the tabernacle of Shiloh. He was fine to turn his back on it for what they have done and desecrated it to it. And then finally, only true obedience and justice secure divine favor. It is not previously locations and things that were elevated by God that he honors, but it is true obedience and justice. And this is a picture, an artist rendering of Jeremiah here. He stood on trial for this, for saying, "This house shall become like Shiloh." This is what he is telling the Jewish people of his day, that Babylon is coming, they're getting ready to destroy everything. And he's saying, this house shall become like Shiloh. And they put him on trial and they say, you're blaspheming. You're saying that this place is going to be destroyed. And he's saying, this is what the Lord is telling me. You know, I'm not saying this because I'm trying to blaspheme. This is a command from the Lord. And he's ultimately acquitted for speaking the word of the Lord, even though the word of the Lord is talking about their destruction. So I hope that gives you some deeper insight into this overturning of the money-changing tables, that this is a requirement that people had to come and pay the temple tax, but they were exchanging the temple tax unequally. They were taking a bigger cut of it. And Jesus is declaring them that they are creating his house to be a den of robbers. And this is a reference back in the Old Testament when they are crediting a place and a location of having God's protection, of being sacred in itself, when God's protection isn't tied to a particular area. And this wall that was around the temple that protected or that kept the Gentiles out from the holy temple area, this is part of the dividing wall of hostility that Jesus completely broke down, like physically and spiritually, that allows us, Gentile people, to go into the holiest of holies. And it creates this new idea that the place of worship is not a place, it's not a location, it's not a building, but Jesus is the new temple. And because he is the new temple, he allows us also to be temples, an indwelling of the Holy Spirit, to where now it's not in a building, but it is in a person, that we each become temples of the Holy Spirit, where we have access to the holiest of holies, that innermost relationship with God, to where God can dwell with his people. And it's not just once a year, it is continually. Amen. Thank you all.